Welcome, everybody, to Recovery Machine. I'm your co host, Nathan, joined as always by co host Corey. This is episode 27. How are you doing, Corey?
I'm very good, Nathan. Very good. Yeah. Looking forward to this episode with you.
Me too. And today we have with us a mystery nurse, a registered nurse that works somewhere in BC, has agreed to come on, and it's going to be interesting to get her perspective on her current status within the system of the machine and how she's been treated in general. So thank you, mystery guest, and welcome.
Thank you.
So we want to, first and foremost, we want to kind of keep you as safe as we can in this episode, protect your identity to the fullest. That said, we want to explore your story a little bit. So we won't ask you all of the background that we might ask our other guests. And we want to keep any identifiers out of this. But can you explain to us first of all, just what some of the personal medical work factors were that led up to you developing an issue with substance use?
So one of the main introductories actually to my drug of choice, or the route I was using, I was having some background medical issues for a while. And at one point it landed me in the ER, so I became one of those patients introduced to opioids from the system when they pushed IV Dilaudid. When I had that happen, just the feeling, the dopamine rush and everything else, and my nursing skills was the first addiction thought that went in my brain of, I can do this myself. I had that background knowledge, and after that, it just made everything easier. I wasn't dealing with my personal factors very well. I mean, you graduate nursing school, but it doesn't actually graduate you into maturity. I don't have the personal skill development that was needed to also manage what was happening at work and my personal life and this balance. So work was also starting to get stressful and not a lot of resources either, just because of all the other duties to report if you were to seek out any type of help. There's a fine line of that too, of nurses being encouraged to report to manager or the college. So I was just kind of stuck in this hard place of having this medical problem that they weren't able yet to identify, as well as some other chronic conditions, some personal stuff that was happening that I didn't have the skills to navigate on my own, compounded by the stress and stuff as well at work that needed, and then being introduced to the substance of Dilaudid through our actual healthcare system.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I've had that experience myself. It was a similar situation. Would you say that when you were introduced to hydromorph, it seemed to not just help with the pain that you're experiencing from your illness or whatever landed you in the hospital, but it also helped with emotional pain and other things that were going on at the time? Is that
It gave me a little bit of energy at the start. You had the euphoria. I was kinder at work. It definitely at that point had my brain, but it wasn't enough yet for me to recognize the addiction. Instead, it made all my problems go away. They weren't the focus. I was able to focus on other aspects.
right? Yeah, no, that we've heard that story before. We've both been through that personally. It makes a lot of sense.
But you think the link established itself pretty quickly?
Yes, when I described my addiction to others, it was more, once it got my brain, it was done. Like, up until then, I felt I had control. I used it infrequently at work, and I didn't quite see where the line when it finally grabbed me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to see coming. Yeah. So what led to you being discovered? How did your college figure out what was going on?
So, from my understanding, in 2019, it was kind of silently phased out in some of the policies that managers could manage this in their office or in their units and departments. They didn't actually have to go higher up and report, even though there's this duty to report that the college says. There's kind of this fine line that no, there's actually this other pathway route, which is what nurses can find when they access the union first, or they have alternative channels where the college doesn't even discover it. And I've learned this even in speaking with other fellow Caduceus members and groups that theirs was taken care of in-house. It was discovered, but the manager kept it because they actually were able to. But this wasn't broadcasted to many places. So I had a new manager, and when I was reported, it wasn't actually a major report of saying there's this huge problem or we need you to investigate or we're doing a duty to report. It was more of this, we've had this investigation, we're just informing you that so-and-so is going off work. We're hoping that she gets the treatment she needs and will return back. There was no concerns really listed about my practice. It was noted that they had no concerns about my practice and they had no proof and they'd done their own investigation. They were just informing I would be leaving for a little bit and didn't even actually say what it was for. And after that, that's what launched an investigation with the college. But I was also told to call the college myself and inform them that I would be going off of work. So before the letter got sent, I did call to the college to inform I will be going off for medical leave, and I didn't actually say what it was. It was just a medical leave thing. So at least it was documented. My name was there.
Okay. So how did anybody get to a conclusion then when you, I'm assuming opiates weren't brought up in any of those conversations at first. Is that correct?
That is correct. It wasn't even brought into the letter sent to the college informing. It was more that was enough that they launched this investigation, even though I had my IME done, all of this was done. They didn't really become involved until they sent me this letter to go non-practicing. Months later after that, they'd be launching this investigation.
So how much later was it that until you found out the details of their investigation?
So they didn't really do this in-depth investigation. So basically what happened was I went on leave, the union got involved, I called leave, they advised me what to do. What actually helped me in all this case too was they told me to go non-practicing or make the license switch, and I procrastinated. Plus I was panicking and I refused. I didn't do it until the college sent the letter. And it was actually when the college sent the letter is what actually enabled me to go on the longer term disability, because I passed all the things that the IME said to do relatively quickly, but because I didn't have my license, I couldn't return to work. So they couldn't take me off that long-term disability until I got my license back. So I actually completed everything from the time it was done when I got sent home. I was ready to go to work in 6 months from that. From the day of being sent home from work to completing everything with the IME and completing inpatient treatment. One of the conditions was having 30 days abstinent even after getting out of treatment before I could return to work. So all in all, it was a 6-month thing. The college told me they'd be investigating probably 3-4 months into it. I didn't hear from the college until all of a sudden I was like pretty much ready to go. All these things were passed from the IME when I first got my first thing saying we're investigating. Don't talk to anybody. Be confidential. So that was 6 months in. I got my first review from it in 8 months from the time I got sent home, and then we started the negotiations. And from there, I finally got my final negotiations and consent agreement done. All in all, 11 months into it. And from my understanding, mine went actually quicker, and I don't know why. And I was even told that by my elite representative that it went quick. And then my understanding with the investigation, they didn't actually talk to any of my colleagues, and I was aware of that. What they took was just the initial complaints that went into my manager, but they didn't even take into consideration what my manager had investigated and the conclusion of that, and they used those complaints still against me.
Yeah, I notice your case is particularly strange just because Well, there's some factors there that might not be able to go in specifically. Actually, now that I think about it, but there was some differences between what your IME doctor had recommended and what the college ended up with. There's some interesting ones there. Can you tell us a little bit about how your timeline shaped up? Just because I'm curious where they got this from. I've never.
Yeah, so at the start too, when I was panicking about the investigation, Leap had told me the college would basically follow what the IME said, what the addiction specialist doctor said. I don't think they liked that too much, and I was lucky enough to have an IME that really backed up the reasonings of why I didn't have to do some of the stuff that was usually given with others. So mine IME stated again, I would complete the inpatient treatment, followed by 30 days sobriety with generic limitations that we see with everybody. The first year, you don't handle any controlled substances. The second year, I could. And the third year, the second year, I had to have a second nurse sign and witness. And then the third year, I was free range without having to have a second nurse as long as there's no concerns. During these 3 years, I was also to have twice a month random urine biological monitoring sampling. And that was it. And mine was to start the sampling and all the stuff was to start before I returned to work at the start signing of my contract. And that's the relapse prevention agreement. When I went to the college, they threw some extra things on. And I didn't have to go to meetings. That was a big thing, and he brought that up, and we had that discussion. I went to the college, and we had to go through numerous negotiations, and one of the things that they were bringing in for many nurses is they're now doing mandatory hair testing on top of the random twice-a-month drug testing. And the hair testing goes back 3 months, and they also want you to do the twice random urine, which made no sense. So my understanding and others are doing it too argued on cultural aspects in regards to hair. So I had that taken out, but the next condition they put on in that negotiation, what came back was, should I ever have a positive, or if I miss one of my random urine samples, I was to have immediately a drug hair test or witness urine sample. And the witness urine sample is different than my usual one because it means it's very, I have to expose myself. Basically, they put the instructions in there too. I'm supposed to lift my shirt up to mid-chest. I have to pull my pants and underwear all the way down to my ankles, and I have to do a full 360 spin in front of the monitor while they observe me doing the sample. And that's to be done within 24 hours, and same with the hair sample. The other thing the college then brought in was, yes, I have this IME thing. Even in the IME, the doctor said it would be best if I didn't return to a workplace with narcotic or controlled substance handling. It would be in the best interest. The college has now started approaching this of making the nurses, basically mandating us to handle these substances or we get an extra year monitoring. And that's what happened with mine was I had this opportunity to go into a position now that didn't have me accessing or administering any controlled substances, and the college had said, no, if you don't actually go and have access and administer controlled substances, so putting me in this dangerous position, we are going to give you another year monitoring. And when I did ask for the data for how successful these programs were, because I could see the dangerous situation I'm being put in of, wouldn't it be best if, I got this job lined up, I don't have to return to this area of nursing, but now you're actually putting me in this area of nursing and putting me in danger of a program that really has no evidence.
I'll just quickly mention here that this is a pretty bizarre twist that seems to be a recent thing. I haven't been able to summon up any evidence to kind of corroborate what the college's plan is or to back up that kind of a paradigm. it is very concerning to me because, I mean, obviously, I would tend to agree with your IME doc on the statement that avoiding narcotics is probably the best case scenario for any of us who've been in this situation. Mandating it as part of the completion of your treatment, or getting an extra year, I mean, that's I don't know, extortion at best, coercion, maybe, I suppose you could say. But either way, it puts you in a situation where bad things can happen. Now, there's a couple other things here that I'm not sure if you want to talk about, but I guess we can ask, what kind of challenges are you facing now? Because when you started out, you were in a position where it was a little bit safer, and then you've been transferred. Now you had an opportunity to stay in the safe zone, but they've put you right into the mayhem. You're now in a much busier workplace, and you're still in a spot where you're not supposed to be handling narcotics. Is that correct?
Yes, I am supposed to have access, but not allowed to have access. So I have to be in a place where they're using them, but I'm not allowed to have the codes. I'm not allowed to waste or give or administer or witness or anything like that. So I have to be around it, but not.
Yeah, that's an odd one, Corey. I don't know. I'm not sure what the logic could be there. I guess they're thinking this is a test, right? But I mean, it's an awfully dangerous gamble, isn't it?
It sure feels like that to me. It feels like they are like they are gambling with this individual's life. Like,
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, there isn't evidence to reinforce this yet. What we know about, well, two things. What we know about positions or units, departments, areas of nursing where narcotics are given, those are quite inherently more fast-paced, high-volume, busy areas of nursing. So there, associated with that is some risk in itself. But also what we know about environment with any kind of addictive behavior, if given the choice for someone who says, yeah, I always picked up my street drug from this neighborhood, and then they go into recovery and abstinence, and you say, okay, you have the choice of either staying right on that same street corner in this same neighborhood or moving somewhere else where it's a new environment and there's less stress and less triggers and stuff. We would have no question about that the latter would keep someone safer. So
Right. Yeah.
safety doesn't seem to be the priority there. It seems like it is in fact a test or a trust building exercise, for lack
Right.
of a better term.
Yeah. So, mystery nurse, you're in a situation where you are not supposed to be handling narcotics, but you're surrounded by narcotics in a busy workplace. What kind of challenges are you like? How challenging are you finding that right now?
Actually finding it pretty challenging just because I came from a less stressed workplace where I didn't have access, and then being moved into a place that I didn't want to be. But then also, understanding too that we're chronically short-staffed. Patients are more complex and sicker. There's this bigger harm reduction approach of giving controlled substances, and we're seeing more of that. So what has happened, and I've talked to other nurses too, is you're not supposed to be leaving controlled substances out. And that was one of the first things I noticed is if we had a lot of palliatives or a lot on pain control or on the IMAP program, all of this stuff was just left out. They would take it out because they didn't have time, so there would be tons of syringes filled with, same with those on seizures, with Ativan, and then there's a whole bunch of different syringes marked with Dilaudid. And ketamine is big now too, and they would all just be sitting out there, or just the pills because they knew they had to go back, and they would just grab everything they needed, and those could be sitting out for an undeterminate length of time. And I'd even say you can't be having these out nobody really cared at that point too, because I'd come walking by where the med counter is, because it's not just a narcotic controlled substance zone, it is a zone for numerous things in there. It's not a separate med room, it's like a walkthrough space. Nobody cared. They would just say, "Oh, I trust you."
They're aware of what you're going through because they've been informed that you're trying to recover or get through this situation where you had an issue with drug use at work or outside of work. I think in your case, it was never. I think it was just you weren't diverting or taking anything. It was just an outside of work thing. But regardless, that's not going to make it any easier if you're trying to work and nobody is helping you keep those boundaries up. So that's, I don't think I could do that.
I have to make a comment here. This is what I mean, that first of all, the business of drugs lying around on the counter. This was a huge contributing factor to the escalation of my addictive behavior, and this was what I did. I would take it off the countertop, and it was, I think, the first time I ever heard that this was going to change and this would be enforced, and no longer will we have drugs out on the countertop. That won't be allowed. Half-used vials will not be allowed to be sitting out. Our sharp containers are going to change. All of these things that it was years that I was hearing this, long before I was ever entrenched in that behavior, and long before I went off work. And then close to, I remember like weeks before I went off work, I was told that again, this is going to change. It never changed. There seems to be very, very little desire to enforce that or to change, to implement any kind of change around how narcotics and controlled substances sit around.
And yet listen to the rhetoric that you hear. I mean, if you read one of these contracts, you'd think that, in our guest's case here, you'd think that she was walking back into a controlled environment where everything was locked away nicely, and there's not going to be any of those type of risks out there. It's all been taken care of. That's supposed to be that side of the monitoring contract, that side of the return to practice or relapse prevention agreement is supposed to be, we'll take care of that. We're going to make sure that you have an environment that's not ridiculous, and so that you can recover and get your feet back under you. And we've known the whole time that this is all nonsense. It's, if anything, it's probably more chaotic than it's ever been. There's probably more stuff lying around. I mean, I don't foresee anything in the future that would make me believe that this is going to change anytime soon.
No,
especially with, I mean, we can't staff the hospitals properly. So you're going to have people with the best of intentions, but fatigue sets in, and you have to triage, right?
Yeah, and the college is interested in nabbing nurses who are caught or suspected of diverting narcotics, but in terms of upholding a practice standard, you'd think that part of that would also be getting to that problem of drugs being so accessible and available, because it is a practice standard that you waste and dispose of medications properly. That's part of safe drug handling and medication administration, is that you then dispose of them. And so if that's not being done, all of these units are violating that practice standard from the beginning.
Yes. And where's the regulation?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's, a continued dialogue. There's a lot of talk, and it's not a lot of action. So it seems a little unfair. That's the conclusion that I mean, to put it lightly, putting somebody at this stage of recovery back into that environment, I think it's unreasonable to start with, regardless of, even if all the practice guidelines were followed and everything was supposed to be safe. I mean, the fact that you're required at some point again to pick up that syringe full of hydromorph yourself and get back into the habit of injecting that into people. I don't know.
So can we, mystery nurse, you've been nodding along as we've been talking here, that in agreement. Can you outline a few other challenges? We're aware that there have been a few other challenges at the workplace for you with this issue.
Yeah, so on top of just medications just lying around, there's been numerous times too that the entire controlled substance area, cupboard, lockbox, that's a big thing, has been left unlocked. And other nurses have come by and have said, who's left this open? And who knows how long it's been open, that it's just sitting like that. Yeah. The other thing is practice standard too of having somebody witness your waste. Now, this is the problem with the short staffed, and I was turned away from other positions because they recognize the short staffness. But on night shifts, they're supposed to have 5 nurses. When we're short staffed, it's easily 3, which means when one is on break or one's not available, there's just me and one other nurse. I can't waste. So now that nurse has to leave the unit to go to a whole other unit to have that signed or monitored as a waste as per protocol. And it leaves now one nurse on the entire unit of 20 plus patients for cares. Measures go up. So what has happened instead is the nurse watch them waste it. So then I'll watch the next one waste it when they switch their break so they can sign for each other. I've also, because it's so short-staffed, they don't have the time to always get back to their patients, and I get it. It's not fair that they have to police and monitor me, and they've been put in this position of monitoring and enforcing my restrictions to the point now they pull the medication, they're busy, they don't care, they hand it to me, they won't give it. It's more like, I don't care. I don't care if you use it. I don't care if the patient uses it. I don't care if you sell it on the street or the comments I get. Like, I just don't care. Here you go. I've signed it out. I've got to go. Those are the comments I get all the time. I trust you, which not the best, but yeah, they'll rationalize it too. But there, I trust you. I don't care. I really don't care if you use it. I don't care if patient ever gets it. But yeah, that's basically it. It's the I don't care. I'm too rushed. I really don't care what happens. Best of luck kind of thing.
Yeah, and that sounds very jaded, sounds very cynical and cold, but I think people have to kind of understand the state of nursing as well. I mean, all the nurses you're working with are also exhausted, right? They're working under conditions that are less than favorable, and like I said, they're trying to triage patients, and it is a difficult situation for everybody to be in. That being said, I mean, man, that is pretty hard. Somebody telling you I don't even care, just do whatever with it.
They don't acknowledge this kind of thing. This to my safety. I've explained it. These are my restrictions to like get some stuff, but they also don't understand what's the point. Like they know I'm being monitored because if I'm selected for a drug test on the day I'm at work, I have to leave, and then they have to cover my patient load until I get back. But it's a requirement for public safety to pull me off that busy floor to go and do this random urine sample. So yeah, they're just they know it's part of the restriction. They just don't get it when I'm being randomly drug tested twice a month too. I'm not as much help as I could be at times. And because of that, if I have to wait for those nurses now, like when I do push the boundary, which is tough for me, is then my patients are delayed with their pain management because I have to wait till that nurse has time, and that can be sometimes 2 hours later for any controlled substance, whether it's a sleeping pill, Ativan, their beer, their pain management thing. So it's being delayed, and I've also had my confidentiality breached by nurses not knowing what to say to the patients when some of them clue in that somebody else is bringing in these medications. To where I've actually had a nurse say, Amber can't give out the controlled substances, and I had to pull that nurse aside and be like, You can't tell the patients the restrictions I have. Like, let's try something different.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a tough one. Um, did you have something there, Corey? Before I wanted to mention something else, but
Lots.
lots.
This, to me, this is just, it's such an outrageous story. And you are absolutely right, Nathan, in that this is the product of our current healthcare system, that all of these nurses are just stressed to the max and stretched so thin. Obviously, couldn't agree more. But this is where, in my opinion, nurses are perpetuating the problem, or failing to see that some resistance or some drawing a line of saying, no, we have to uphold these standards. Nurses are the keeper of that.
They are.
And as soon as we become so flexible to the point that we are putting our colleagues at risk directly, then you are of death.
Mm-hmm.
You're now a part of that same problem. You're a contributor to that whole systemic problem. And to me, nurses, anytime I hear nurses stand up and say, enough is enough, we're not safe, our patients are not safe, our standards of practice are not able to be upheld in this current environment or in this current circumstance, I applaud that. Right now, the nurses in New York City are striking for the same reason, for all of those reasons. But if the tables were turned, and if our mystery nurse were to say to their colleagues, I'm leaving the unit right now. I'm going on a break. I don't care if it leaves you alone. I don't care if you're going into this room with an aggressive or violent patient. I don't care. The shit would hit the fan, and the number of ways that if the tables are turned, these same nurses could be reported. It's so appalling to me.
But look at the situation she's in. You're absolutely right. And what does a mystery nurse do about the fact that she's basically she's been forced into a situation here, or heavily coerced into working in an environment that's not safe. And then she's under requirements from her relapse prevention agreement not to handle or be, not to even be administering these medications, and to have colleagues turn around and just like, here, catch, that is a very difficult situation. And I'm not sure how you manage that. How are you managing that?
I guess with the term would be white knuckling it, just hoping as long as I pass all of my biological monitoring, I'm hoping I don't get plagued, and I just keep moving forward. But it's been very difficult with setting those boundaries again, and realizing this is my license. This falls on me. It doesn't matter that we're short-staffed for what the other nurses are doing, the way the college has set it up. It's individual. You individually protect your license to protect the public, instead of this team approach that this team's putting me in danger, but it doesn't matter because as long as they're following their restriction or their restrictions, their scope, and I'm following mine, it should be fine. But I'm very stressed. I get stressed when I go to work, depending on who's on, depending what patient they give me, if it's more appropriate or not. It does cause some discomfort when I'm given different patients or what seems like a lighter load. I feel like I also am more obligatory to do more, because if these nurses are going to be giving my medications or checking to see if that fentanyl patch is there and signing it off or anything like that. I feel I have to be more available to help them.
Right. Yeah. No matter what you do, you're kind of in a situation that you're going to be uncomfortable. And it gives, like, just listening to you describe that gives me the type of angst that is fuel. Like that's fuel for using drugs. In my case anyways. I do want to quickly mention something to people who don't realize this. I found this astonishing. They are now serving beer and alcoholic beverages as part of, I guess this is uh, this is a harm reduction approach because they, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't want people to be forced into the alcohol withdrawal protocols when they go to the hospital. So nurses are now required to serve alcohol along with everything else they do. Have I got that correct?
Yes, it's becoming more common.
What is happening? I can't. This is we passed the realm of bizarre quite a while ago, but this is getting. I mean, you were juggling like 10 chainsaws that are lit on fire, and now, by the way, let's make sure everybody's good and drunk.
Well, yeah, that behavior thing, but they've also neglected to consider there's many different nurses with cultural backgrounds where they're not allowed to touch alcohol or give it. Not only those nurses can't do it, they now have to ask somebody else, or you've now impeded on their religious cultural rights. And I've seen that as well at work. I can't do it because of restrictions, so and so can't do it because of this. Patients getting more behaviorally challenging because they're not getting their scheduled beer at this time that they're allowed to have, and then trying to manage those behaviors because you never know what's actually going to come out. But the alcohol, it doesn't take into consideration the nurses and the other patients on the unit who have trauma backgrounds with alcohol.
So the other thing that I notice is in hearing you speak that a nurse with restrictions or a nurse with a cultural background that acts in place of a restriction that would stop them from being comfortable with that, this creates sort of a power imbalance too. And with a power imbalance comes the opportunity to take advantage of someone. And if a nurse, whether it is because of a restriction from the college secondary to an addictive behavior, or a religious or cultural background, and they feel like they have to take on extra tasks to smooth things over to make it better with their colleagues, that sounds abusive to me. if we put that into the context of like a relationship, I have to do all these things or else this person is going to be pissed at me. That sounds like an abusive relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering,
Yeah.
mystery nurse, what is your recourse here? Like, what could you do as far as now? I'm guessing you've probably asked you've asked your LEAP officer. I'm not exactly sure what kind of communication has went on, but do you think there's any, if this continues and everybody is just marching right past your monitoring agreement and basically saying to hell with it, we're going to do whatever, and your boundaries don't mean anything to us, do you feel like you have any recourses or any way to mitigate that?
No, absolutely not. Even I have brought it forward, and I do have an upcoming meeting again with the manager. I'm basically having to create a paper trail or a legal trail of me voicing these concerns and bringing it forward. But I'm hesitant to name other nurses. I'd rather speak to them directly because I wasn't given that either. You're taught to deal with your conflicts interpersonally before you escalate it up to manage it. But I don't. It's more like I do take on these extra things, and when I do ask nurses, some nurses, when I explain, because we get new ones all the time as well, where I now have to tell them I have restrictions, which means I'm going to have to come and ask you to give these substances, and when I ask them to do it, they're like, yeah, can you do this and this and this for me?
Oh, I
So
see.
they will give me a list of things to do too right away, and I'm like, all right. And it's not just a simple med exchange. It is,
Can you give us an example?
yeah, so it can be a lot of personal care, which is fine. So the medication might take them, 10 minutes tops to go and draw up, sign for it, give to the patient, and I might have to go into a major bowel care cleanup that has now taken half an hour because it's an explosive one in the thing. It's a two-person care that's needed. and now my time is in there for half an hour for that, or going in with a behavioral challenge patient to give them medication, to where I'm ducking and dodging, trying to gently encourage this patient to take something with like applesauce or things like that will pop up. And it might pop up later of, I gave you this med, can you now go give this med to this patient who's delirious and has hit like 3 of us now? Can you get this in?
Right. So transactional to the point of you're literally you're getting the shit jobs and you're the jobs that nobody else wants. So thus escalating the difficulty level of an already preposterously difficult situation. I wonder if that was considered at all by anybody who made those return to practice agreements.
Great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I doubt
it. Yeah.
You mentioned having to create a paper trail. You mentioned, feeling uncomfortable about, for lack of a better term, ratting on your colleagues or naming names about your colleagues. Do you see other barriers that are either literal or sort of implied that are in place that could stop someone from coming forward with concerns or speaking their experience?
Yes, because I can't go to the college, especially since I was put in a position of either I give this medication or not, and I, have had to give something right then and there, even with them watching or not watching. So I've been put in some precarious situations, which now makes it challenging where I can't actually go to the college to say what's happening because now it puts me at risk of investigation. And with how supportive they have been, I have no idea what's going to come next or what repercussions I'm going to have because it's going to be on me and not the situation that they put me in.
Right.
Because I didn't want to be here. It was them pushing back with all the restrictions and requirements that have led me to be in this position. So I can't go to them and I can't go to my manager really to say, I can only say in a roundabout way, this is the culture. They're not respecting boundaries, but I am no longer given the option to even have this trust relationship with any of them because so far they have not been working in the best of my interest.
Mhm.
So I am kind of stuck of either trying to manage these personal relations with all the nurses and with the patients without getting me more in more trouble or restrictions.
Right. And I can absolutely empathize with your reluctance to go to the college, even if you were, everything was ticking along exactly as your return to practice agreement was written. Nobody in your position or the position that we've been in is going to go to the college with anything. Why? Because every wave you make has a repercussion, and it usually comes back to you as some sort of a relapse behavior or some kind of you're in a situation where you don't want to draw attention to yourself at all, and yet you're under duress in the proximity of your drug of choice, and literally nobody's watching.
Nobody's watching except for higher ups. I do know of a few other nurses who were on the unit right before I got back as well, and other units in the hospital who have relapsed because of the culture, not just with the other nurses. So far, mine have been, pretty good for the most part. But with the leaving the medications around, and I even brought forward concerns, and I still haven't had a response of, am I supposed to be having patients with the fentanyl patch or with the sub-Q lines? Because in the sub-Q lines, you're still holding 0.4 mils of medication,
Mhm.
and those fentanyl patches, even when they do a check, if it goes missing at 5 o'clock or 1700, yet it's been signed for, it now looks terrible on me as well. Bringing things up and no one's really addressing, everyone's just trying to survive, and I'm trying to survive alongside, but whereas they might have 2 hoops to jump through, I've got 20 to make it through a 12-hour shift.
Right. So, I mean, we wanted to ask you a little bit about the culture and how that affects you, but is it is it still kind of the just get over it, do your job, and tough it out kind of mentality? That are you seeing any improvement there on the front lines, or is it
No improvement. And then, like, besides the I don't care, it's always I have restrictions. And then the nurse is like, well, why? And you're told you don't have to tell them why or why you have restrictions, but it's pretty obvious when you're not allowed to go around the controlled substances. And I'm now telling numerous people all the time why I can't give because I have these restrictions from the college. And so then the hardest part too is now building these relationships where I have a few stigmas against me. One of addictions, and two, possibly because of my background that I'm now navigating that we know it's real. It's in the research and evidence. If these colleagues haven't worked through their biases, I might have that as well, which I can see when it comes out just with a comment of, I don't care if you use this.
Yeah.
I don't care if the patient does. Basically, almost a thing of, even though they might not be intending it, that it's only a matter of time. And they've seen that with a few others that at some point, yes, they have relapsed because of condescending remarks made to them, or as well, the medications being left openly. And then, yes, the lockbox thing, the sharps does nothing because when those sharps containers are full, guess where they go? In a separate room that nobody else can see, but you have access to until they're picked up. Like it's a very dangerous situation, and I have to use all of my healthier coping mechanisms, but I am always very stressed. I have a lot of anxiety when I go on, not just because of the patient workloads, but because of these extra things I have to manage without a lot of support.
Do you feel that you're sort of being set up? Does it leave you with that feeling?
Yes, and I felt that at the very start when they did that, and we tried very hard. Like my union team, and even I left out the really good disability manager as well, who was trying hard. And that's what I felt when all of a sudden they came in. I had this great IME saying I shouldn't have access. Fair enough. I can do that. There's all these other things. And then all of a sudden having the college come down on me and say, no, if you don't want to keep paying because I have to pay financially for these tests, if I want an extra year of my life back, I now have to go in and work with these substances as per the college. Whereas the IME one, I could have been done earlier. I could have still met all these restrictions. I could get into a position which I had of never touching controlled substances again. I would have enjoyed that, but nope, the college has now come in and said, guess what? As you mentioned earlier, if I was to go past the part that I use, you're supposed to switch your routine. You don't go past the alcohol store that you use. You don't go past where your dealer's place was. And now it's like, you get to keep going past this. They put me in a position where there's more of them now. So I do feel like at the start I was being set up where I was just like, are you kidding me? You're now going to put me into this environment of I have to give them?
It's really baffling to me because the doctor who made the statement on your IME, independent medical evaluation, this is what the college is supposed to use for evidence-based treatment. So when a college goes against, and I mean, your IME doctor is not some guy who just rolled out of school. This is a doctor who is well respected, knows what he's doing, a lot of experience, etc. And I just wonder where these proclamations come from. How does the college get it in their head that this is the right thing to do? Where are they getting the evidence? Is it evidence-based at all? What is motivating them to do this? I mean, I would love to get a real answer for that, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's such a strange system. That being said, from your perspective, being somebody who's front lines, you're in the trenches right now in this weird environment. Is there anything that you can see that would be a kind of a simple fix or something that could be made better just by a couple protocol changes? What kind of advice could you give to the machine if you had the ability to do so?
If I had just given a different position, because not all nursing positions need to be in this, like no problem. The next big thing is the safe staffing. So the college is all about protecting the public, yet there's no pressure being put onto these workplaces. Sure, publics protect the safe staffing ratios. If I had enough nurses every shift and the care aides and everything else needed, it would make my restrictions a lot easier to manage, even just like the night shift or during the day when we're busy and you're in an acute medicine area. It is extremely difficult to leave, and now I am leaving all those colleagues and my patients care in an unsafe environment. But yet I'm going to be the one in trouble. And then, yeah, enforcing some of their practices with the narcotics and controlled substances. It's a disaster. It's a really dangerous situation, and it really needs to come from multiple different directions, like having more addictions units for those patients that now are medically stable. It's now an addictions thing. Let's move them down there. We don't have enough of that. We don't have enough mental health. We don't have enough palliative services.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty difficult, I guess, to make any even subtle changes to policy or protocols when you don't have the workforce to implement them.
Yep, and then changing the program as well. They're all about this abstinence approach, which is fine, but they don't give any other resources or support. Not that I would take them either, but that was what really bothered me at the start was they didn't get an actual full investigation. They came in heavy with this abstinence and then didn't follow my IME or what my addiction specialist was saying, and everything they were doing wasn't current, up to date, evidence based.
Yeah. And yet that's how it's going to be. That's how it's going to be publicized. If you ask any questions, the answers you're going to get is that, oh, it's all evidence based medicine. It's really not. It's really not. It's very, the data driven policies are few and far between. So
Not a simple response, and not acknowledging that I'm also a person and not just a nurse, like that I have a dual role. But really, ultimately, when I look at it, it would have been a lot easier if they kept me in the job that I love, that I didn't have access to anything, and away I go.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
And what about on a workplace culture level? Like, what would you change about? And there's obvious ones like not being pressured by your colleagues to be okay with doing some of the things that you've had to do here. But how do you see creating a lasting change in nursing culture? Because to me, when I think about this, and we had mentioned the phrase, nurses eating their young. Well, it's not that this is not the case of nurses eating the young, but maybe nurses eating the vulnerable. And I have seen that as well, that where nurses can be very hard on other nurses if they are perceived as being vulnerable in any which way, whether it's that they are struggling with their mental health or struggling with an addictive behavior or something's going on at home or whatever it may be. I think we can all think of times where we've seen sort of bullying behavior. So how do you change that culture in nursing, or does it have to come from the top? What do you think?
It's actually going to be really difficult, right? Because it's going to be a policy thing. That what those nurses are doing are within legal boundaries and legislation. Those microaggressions can't be really disciplined with the policy when they're making the policies within whatever the legal aspects of BC are, when they're like, no, this is actually what bullying means. Here's the precedent. So HR doesn't have to do any changes when the province has set these things out. So it's very difficult to make those policy changes when higher up we have this very broad weird thing of what bullying looks like. So for me, when I look at the environment, yeah, I don't see policies changing. That's going to be difficult to even put into words when it's like, no, you're breaking the law because the law says this. But it's more like having more interpersonal sessions. Again, one thing I always hate about nursing when they put us in this high regard, which is fantastic, but more it's like you don't get this automatic maturity when you get handed your degree. All of a sudden you're not this emotionally intelligent person, and we see that with the interactions with the patients and with each other, to where I feel like workplace environments, they do need more training on more support. So right now I think you get like 6 counseling sessions paid per year, but I feel like there should be a lot more of that, because when people are engaging in these behaviors, it's coming from a personal thing, and we know our personal values and our attitudes and beliefs come into our professional work, which is tough because this is where the college doesn't see this personal aspect. You're a nurse and a nurse only, when really, when I walk out of there, I am also now a community member and a Canadian with a whole bunch of stuff that I need to work on. It's not acknowledged, but I do see they need more support. So we need more of a speak up culture. We do need enabling leadership, meaning leadership that also believes in getting rid of this bullying aspect and supporting those who speak up and giving them the support of, actually, no, this is a bullying aspect. But I also need leadership that is able to understand how this is Indigenous specific racism to this person, or this is a stigma and a bias that has now popped up, and to give them the words that the nurses might need or how to navigate that, with also not shaming those nurses. Sometimes they really might not know that it is a full bullying or line or whatever else. They think they're just being direct. So it's very difficult conversations, and I think, yeah, we need leadership that enables it. We need more support outside of work for nurses to address whatever's happening. We need more words, how to say the words at work and have the supportive environment. But for the most part, yeah, it's a struggle to set boundaries and then navigate hostile interactions. I usually meet it with humor. Not all the nurses have that, and I see that, especially with the new grads that do get eaten alive a bit, where I have to step in, and when I step in, then I need to be ready to have those aggressions to me. It's a tricky dance every day at work.
Sounds like it.
It really sounds like it. You know, to me, I can't help but think that a courageous manager could not change the system, but could do a lot to change the culture within a unit of some of that stuff. But I also know that like this whole system right now is designed so that those microaggressions and that pressure from above is also happening well above the manager and happening pointed down, and it goes down from there too. But in terms of opening up the dialogue, a manager could do that, I think. But I certainly don't know your manager, but from managers that I have experienced in my years as a nurse, primarily they lacked courage to take us on something like that.
Yeah. It sounds like it would take somebody who's strong enough to withstand the storm from above, somehow kind of take that on and then protect the people below them. And that, I believe that is actually one of the best management traits you can have is to kind of shield your people from those forces, because ultimately you're the one who is in charge of dealing with them, right? So not an easy thing, but yeah, the other thing you mentioned, mystery nurse, is the education factor. And I think you're absolutely right there, that there's going to be tons of people, nurses coming right out of school, who don't have the emotional maturity. They don't get it. They don't have the understanding to navigate conversations with, the right words, the right responses. And so a lot of that is probably inflammatory when it's based, it comes from ignorance. So there is an opportunity there maybe for somebody to have a position where their job is actually to it'd be almost like a ward mediator that would help mitigate that. But yeah, it's not an easy thing, especially not now. And you're not gonna see the province all of a sudden dumping money into making things easier for you. It appears they're just hell bent on making things worse. So, but appreciate your thoughts on that. It's all good stuff.
Do you have anything else that you want to add? You've got the floor.
I wish more nurses were aware to contact leave if they're struggling with substances, and that other nurses were also aware of what it actually entails when they go and report somebody for substance use or mental health.
Right.
Like with my situation, now some of them were quite surprised with what's happened. My whole life got blown up. It seemed to be an extreme response. They had very little evidence for anything, and even then, like, I acknowledge I do need help, but they were just so shocked at the extremes and everything that has now happened. I now have this monitoring. What does that mean? Well, I'm also financially paying for it. I can't go anywhere unless I get permission from my monitoring company. I can't really leave this position I'm in because I've been medically duty to accommodate into it, which is a permanent position. So if I want to go to somewhere else, I need to find a manager that's willing to accommodate that twice a month I'm randomly going to be taken into. I'm going to have to go do a drug test, meaning I have to leave and go to the nearest lab that's available. It could be anywhere from 1 to 2 hours that I'm off the floor. I'm like, I wish people knew. Just go to the union with a leave.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to, that's a great message to end with. And I'll reiterate it. Just if you're in a situation where you're thinking of reporting a colleague for suspicious behavior, please just take that colleague, have the courage to ask that colleague if they're okay. At least do them the service of, before you march forward thinking that it's just going to be something that's taken care of easily, because you're basically, even if you have suspicions and there's nothing going on, that person will still face repercussions you can't imagine. And there, in some cases, there may be no evidence of it. So just really do the right thing and talk to the person first. If there's no other way to move forward and you feel that you or your staff or the people you're treating are in danger, then go ahead and do what you have to do. But please talk to the person first. It could make a huge difference.
Yeah, great message, Nathan.
All right. Thank you so much, Mystery Nurse. You really brought it for us. We're very grateful that you're willing to do this. And I think we can leave it there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your courage. That's where change starts. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yep. See you soon, guys.